In the Constitution, we have the right to bear arms. Whether it's incorporated or not, it's stated there. I'm having trouble understanding how we got to a point where a right to privacy, which is not explicitly spelled out, but is spelled out to some degree in the Fourth Amendment, which has settled law and is fixed, and something such as the Second Amendment, which is spelled out in the Constitution, is not settled law and settled fixed. I don't want you to answer that specifically. What I would like to hear you say is, how did we get there? How did we get to the point where something that's spelled out in our Constitution and guaranteed to us, but something that isn't spelled out specifically in our Constitution is? Would you give me your philosophical answer? I don't want to tie you down on any future decisions, but how do we get there when we can read this book and it says certain things, and those aren't guaranteed, but the things that it doesn't say are?
One of the frustrations with judges and their decisions by citizens is that, and this was an earlier response to Senator Coburn, what we do is different than the conversation that the public has about what it wants the law to do. We don't, judges, make law. What we do is we get a particular set of facts presented to us. We look at what those facts are, what in the case of different constitutional amendments is, what states are deciding to do or not do, and then look at the Constitution and see what it says and attempt to take its words and the principles and the precedents that have described those principles and apply them to the facts before you. In discussing the Second Amendment as it applied to the federal government, Justice Scalia noted that there had been long regulation by many states on a variety of different issues related to possession of guns. And he wasn't suggesting that all regulation was unconstitutional. He was holding in that case that D.C.'s particular regulation was illegal. As you know, there are many states that prohibit felons from possessing guns. So does the federal government. Mm-hmm. And so it's not that we make a broad policy choice and say, this is what we want what judges do. What we look at is what other actors in the system are doing, what their interest in doing it is, and how that fits to whatever situation they think they have to fix, what Congress or state legislature has to fix. All of that is the court's function. So I can't explain it philosophically. I can only explain it by its setting and what the function of judging is about.
Thank you. Let me follow up with one other question. As a citizen of this country, do you believe innately in my ability to have self-defense of myself, personal self-defense? Do I have a right to personal self-defense?
I'm trying to think if I remember a case where the Supreme Court has addressed that particular question. Is there a constitutional right to self-defense? And I can't think of one, could be wrong, but I can't think of one. Generally, as I understand, most criminal law statutes are passed by states. And I'm also trying to think if there's any federal law that includes a self-defense provision or not. I just can't. What I was attempting to explain is that the issue of self-defense is usually defined in criminal statutes by the state's laws. Yeah. And I would think, although I haven't studied all of the state's laws, I'm intimately familiar with New York.
But do you have an opinion, or can you give me your opinion of whether or not in this country I personally, as an individual citizen, have a right to self-defense?
As I said, I don't
I'm
No,
talking
I
about
don't
your.
know if that legal question has been ever presented,
I wasn't asking about the legal question. I'm asking about your personal opinion.
but that is sort of an abstract question
Well,
with no particular meaning to me outside.
Well, I think that's what American people want to hear, Your Honor.
Well-
Is they want to know, do they have a right to personal self-defense? Does the Second Amendment mean something under the 14th Amendment? Does what the Constitution, how they take the Constitution, not how our bright legal minds, but what they think is important, is it okay to defend yourself in your home if you're under attack? In other words, the general theory is, do I have that right? And I understand if you don't want to answer that because it might influence your position that you might have in a case, and that's a fine answer with me. But those are the kind of things people would like for us to answer and would like to know, not how you would rule or what you're going to rule, but and specifically what you think about it, but just yes or no. Do we have that right?
I know it's difficult to deal with someone like a judge who's so sort of whose thinking is so cornered by law.
I know.
Could I
Kind of like a doctor. I can't quit using doctor terms.
Exactly. That's exactly right. But let me try to address what you're saying in the context that I can, okay? Which is what I have experience with, all right? Which is New York criminal law, because I was a former prosecutor. And I'm talking in very broad terms, but under New York law, if you're being threatened with imminent death or very serious injury, you can use force to repel that. And that would be legal. The question that would come up and does come up before juries and judges is how imminent is the threat? If the threat was in this room, I'm going to come get you, and you go home and get, or I go home, I don't want to suggest I am, by the way. Please, I don't want anybody to misunderstand what I'm trying to say. If I go home, get a gun, come back and shoot you, that may not be legal under New York law because you would have alternative ways.
You'll have lots of explaining to do.
I'd be in a lot of trouble then. But I couldn't do that under a definition of self-defense.
Okay.
And so that's what I was trying to explain in terms of why, in looking at this as a judge, I'm thinking about how that question comes up and how the answer can differ so radically given the hypothetical facts before you.
You know, the problem is we doctors think like doctors, hard to get out of the doctor's skin. Judges think like judges, lawyers think like lawyers, and what American people want to see is inside what your gut says.